Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Are grammar schools the answer to our education mess?
Very straightforward, simple question. Are grammar schools the answer to our education mess? Anna Soubry.
Well, I'm not sure I'd describe it, first of all, as a mess. I mean, it's right that there's, 1.25 million children who are either in poor or in schools that need to improve. But I think it's right that we should have a debate, and I think it's right that we should look at new options, which in many ways what the government is putting forward is something new, which is that existing grammar schools might be able to effectively have satellite schools in neighbouring areas. I mean, I'll be very frank with you. In my constituency, we have 4 secondary schools. I don't think we either need or want a grammar school. One of my schools is an outstanding academy. It's benefited from the academy programme of the last coalition government, and I'm a firm believer in continuing with the academy programme. And I think it's right we have a debate about it. But I do take the view that grammar schools are not the silver bullet that I think some people think they are. But when I look at my neighbouring city of Nottingham, and we've had decades of bad Labour rule, and it has to be said, poor schools, I want to know what the solutions are going to be to make sure that every child, wherever they are, whatever their background is, that they all have the great school that every child needs and deserves.
Will you vote for more grammar schools, or will you vote against when it comes to it?
I don't think I have a problem with take Lincolnshire, which has the 11+. So if there's a need in a town like Newark, which borders Lincolnshire, where we know there are parents who choose to take and put their children into grammar schools in Lincolnshire. If they have a satellite school there, and that is seen to be a good thing to raise what has been a problem in that town with its existing school, I wouldn't have an ideological opposition to that. I would struggle if we said that the solution in a city like Nottingham is to have grammar schools, because I look at what's happened in London, and we've achieved huge success in London by building up the academy programme, by having great and brilliant teachers, by putting aspiration into our schools. That, I believe, is the real solution to making sure every child has a great school.
And not the grammar school as an absolute guarantee.
I just don't think it's an absolute. And we certainly don't want to go back to the system, frankly, that existed when I was young, which is obviously a long time ago. You know, I took the 11+, I passed it. Lots of people failed, and they bore that for the rest of their lives, and that was wrong.
Alistair Campbell.
I think that was a very heroic effort by Anna to pretend that actually she thinks this is anything other than a pretty silly policy. And she's absolutely right, and that's the indication she gave in the House of Commons. The first thing I want to say is, if you watched the end of this programme last week, it was announced that Justine Greening was going to be on the panel. And I know on Twitter it's been saying that I've come on the programme to have a Barney with John McDonnell. I actually was hoping to have a Barney with Justine Greening about this ridiculous backward-looking policy. The reason why, I mean, I honestly don't know why Theresa May is doing this. She has no mandate for it. David Cameron was absolutely clear that he thought this was a retrograde step. If you look at the countries that have the best educated children around the world, there are 3 countries that come up again and again and again: Finland, South Korea, and the other one is...
Oh, never say 3.
Finland, South Korea, and Canada. And they have the most comprehensive systems. They understand that comprehensive means all-inclusive. And the point about selection, Theresa May is trying to give the impression that everybody is going to be selected to go to a grammar school. Selection means rejection. And the rejection that Anna talked about, I went to a grammar school as well. In fact, I went to 2 grammar schools. And the rejection, I think, does give people a sense of stigma that they can stay with through their lives. And I think this country has suffered for too long by having an elitist approach to education. And we should finally give proper, comprehensive education a real go.
Jonathan Letts.
I don't agree with Alistair. I don't think we have had an elitist approach to education for a long time. And I can't see what is wrong with selection. And, OK, that brings rejection. But we are a country of X Factor and Britain's Got Talent. People are comfortable with the idea of children advancing on merit. And I think that I can understand why Labour are uneasy about grammar schools, because if you've been brought up doing Latin prep and stuck into a tight little blazer, you're probably less likely to be a socialist. But I can't understand...
What have tight little blazers got to do with being socialist?
That's what he wore.
So I'm still wearing it. But what I cannot understand is people in the centre, and certainly some people in the Conservative Party in Parliament, who are opposed to grammars, because grammars, it strikes me, are about aspiration, about excellence, about opportunity, and about... Just let me finish.
Okay.
And about competition. And I think competition is very important. Now, the question was, are grammars the answer to our schools' mess? Now, I don't think that is even close to what's being proposed, because there are so many other types of school, and they will continue. But if people want grammars, if parents want grammars, and if teachers want to teach in grammars, I think let it happen. I think I'm all in favour of that, because children, it strikes me as common sense here. Children, if they are in a class with their own ability, are likely to hit off each other and do better as a result. And I can't see why we can have selection on merit in music, we can have it in games. Why can't we have it with academic excellence?
All right. I'll come to our two other panellists in a moment, but there are a lot of hands up, so let's just hear from our audience here. The woman in red there in the back row.
I was just wondering, with regard to the towns and cities that don't have grammar schools, the schools that are there that aren't necessarily doing as well, why aren't we putting more money and investing into those schools to support the children that have learning difficulties, that have disabilities, that have mental health problems?
That's exactly what we're doing.
The man there with... Man with spectacles there. Yes, you, sir.
The competition on the X Factor is for entertainment,
yes.
and 90% of that in the early stages is about humiliation. And I think selection of 11-year-olds to take the cream off the top, as the elites would put it, I think is well, it's a scandal, and a debate should end right now.
All right. Two voices against. Any voices in favour of more grammar schools? You say yes.
Yeah, I'm in favour of grammar schools, but...
Sorry, I was going to go to the man behind you, actually. It's all right.
Yeah, so...
Competition here.
So, yeah, firstly, I think... well, I went to a grammar school sixth form myself, and I think we need to remember that Theresa May's proposals are not just saying, oh, there's going to be one 11 plus, if you fail that, you've got no chance of going to a grammar school. There's going to be 12 plus, 13 plus. So there is going to be sort of a bit of time if someone doesn't pass their 11 plus, they can sort of try again the next year. And you know, I think it really does sort of foster this sort of idea of aspiration. And I mean, that's part of the reason why I managed to get into the grammar school sixth form nearby. And I just want to quickly go to a point that Alistair made about sort of the divisions in our education system today. If we're going to be talking about you know, a lack of fairness in our education system and a lack of rejection, why can't we talk about private schools and the role they have?
I agree with that.
Okay.
I mean, that's
John McDonnell.
Watch my lips. I agree with Alistair Campbell 100% on this issue.
That New Labour was a great success.
He's at it again with spin, isn't he? Anyway, look.
Well, actually, when you say it was great success, New Labour never abolished the grammar schools, did they?
No, we prevented the extension of any new ones.
Yeah, but you didn't abolish the ones that were there.
No, and actually, I frankly wish that we had. But that is a very difficult opinion to hold at that time. Tony Blair took a judgment that it wasn't worth the political aggro we were going to have. But I actually think we should have dealt with this election issue once and for all.
Outlawed selection, stopped it.
Yep.
John McDonnell?
All the evidence demonstrates that, yes, grammar schools will benefit a limited few, but will disbenefit others, and do not raise standards overall. That isn't just me talking. was David Cameron, it's exactly as Alistair said. That's why he opposed it. He said it was taking us backwards to the 1950s. It's the head of Ofsted. It's the very person who was appointed by this government to look at social mobility. It's the Institute for Education. It's all those international comparisons. This is the wrong way to go. The right way to go is to recognise we have got problems in our education system, partly about underinvestment. Class sizes are now rising on a large scale. In addition to that, we've lost, this last year or so, the largest numbers of teachers from the profession that we've lost in a generation, largely because of the intense pressure that they're under on a teaching to the test system that we've got. And if you look at the examples of where we've succeeded in the past in raising standards, yes, look at what happened under Tony Blair, education, 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 under London Challenge, where we had, to be frank, some of the worst schools in the country. We put resources in, we made sure that we brought in the best teachers possible, and now we've got the best schools in the country. And this isn't as well about rich and poor areas. Some of the best schools in London now, as a result of that investment, are in the poorest boroughs. That's the way forward. Right. That's the way about investment and respecting, actually, as well, the professionals within the field itself.
This is really dangerous, but I agree with John McGovern.
Now, Joanne Cherry, as an SNP MP, of course, you don't really have a dog in this fight, do you, when it comes to it? Because this is about England, not about Scotland.
Well, yes, David, education is devolved. We'll have to look very carefully at any proposals that are brought forward by the Conservative government at Westminster to see whether they would have any financial implications for Scotland. But we don't believe that grammar schools are the answer to the challenges of the education system. The challenge of the education system in a democracy should be to give every single child the best chance possible of having a good education. It's natural for parents to want to do the best possible for their own children, but the government has to do the best possible for all children. And all the evidence shows that children from low-income families do worse in selective systems. Kent has a selective system. Evidence shows that in Kent, children from low-income families are not doing as well as other children. Theresa May, when she came to power, made a big song and dance about how she wants to represent working-class families. But in relation to this particular policy, which she's pulled out of her hat, the reality doesn't match her rhetoric. Every country faces challenges with education. And we face a challenge in Scotland, and Nicola Sturgeon has put closing the attainment gap at the heart of our programme for government. But the way we are doing that is to invest in all children. We've doubled early life care so that there's double the amount of time available for 3- and 4-year-olds in preschool care. We're investing £700 million across the school sector in all schools to improve standards. And we're also tackling the underlying social inequality that means that some children don't do as well as others by tackling child poverty in a child poverty bill. That's the way forward, so that every child gets the same chance.
Does your experience in Scotland and what you say, does that entitle you to vote on England and English education and the grammar schools in England?
Well, as I've just said, we're at a very early stage. These
no, but I've asked you a very direct question. When it comes to it, you've talked about the Prime Minister's proposals. Do you think the SNP has a dog in the fight, or should it just stand back and say this is a matter for England?
I can't answer the question of whether the SNP has a dog in the fight until I see the legislation.
Well,
if the legislation has implications for the Scottish budget by what we call Barnett consequentials, then we will vote on it.
Right.
But we have to see the legislation before we can make a decision on that.
Let's just hear now from some members of the audience. We've got a lot of hands up. The woman in there in the striped, with the striped sleeve, yes.
I just want to go back to the idea of kind of competition. I went to the local grammar school after failing the 11+, 12+, and finally passing the 13+. And all through that period of time, at 11, I felt like I was useless, like I didn't deserve an education that was kind of higher than everyone else, because there's only one grammar school in our whole area, so it's kind of
so it's
amplified anyway. And I think with a crisis in young people's mental health anyway, why are we putting that pressure on 11-year-olds when we could be putting more money into fantastic comprehensives?
How did you feel? How did you feel at 13?
I felt like, and when I look at it retrospectively, it was ridiculous. I felt like I'd got somewhere that I finally deserved to be, and then you know, once I got to university and I was surrounded by kids from public school, I realised, oh, actually maybe we're all in the same place, and there are plenty of wonderful kids here who had comprehensive school education, and I was obsessed with something because of the surroundings that I was expected to do.
And the woman in the second row there.
Yeah, I went to a grammar school. I don't feel it did me any better or worse than any other school. There were a lot of children at that time who came from all different social classes and backgrounds, and they all did equally as well. My concern with grammar schools at the moment is that a lot of parents are now paying for their children to have specific training for this test, and they are only passing because they've been given specific training to get through the 11+. These children can get to grammar school and then find they're well out of their depth.
Brief point, Quentin.
These stories, which are very interesting, show surely that there is tremendous appetite for grammars. There is pressure on grammar places. People want to get their children into them. Does that not come out of these stories?
Well,
and grammars are tremendous equalisers of opportunity.
Quentin.
Social mobility is going the wrong way at the moment.
Quentin.
The grammar school system has not helped social mobility, and I believe very firmly that grammar schools could open up opportunities to kids from poor backgrounds who've got the brain power.
They could do
and
that
they
now.
must be right.
3% of grammar school pupils have free school meals. 3%. Compared to 15 in the States. Grammar schools could be doing that now. They don't.
Those figures are very misleading. Kent and Buckinghamshire, for instance, two big counties
have the bigger levels of
counties.
huge levels of the attainment gap in Kent and Buckinghamshire is twice as big as in Hackney, which, as John said, is one of the poorest communities in the
Take a point
country.
from the man
with
there
a
in the
better
third row
education than those
from the back
places.
there. We must keep moving because we've got a lot of other questions. I don't want to stick on grammar schools right through. Yes, sir.
I seem to be the only person in the room that went to a secondary school and failed the 11+, and I'm quite proud that I did it. I felt that if I'd gone to a grammar school at the time, I wouldn't have fitted in. The education that I got in the secondary school was just right for me. I was at the top of the secondary school, so I felt really good. And it was a bit patronising from one of the members to say they'd had that for the rest of their life.
Some did.
Some do.
Many did.
Some do.
Many did.
Lots don't. And every person is different, and if you are academically inclined, then you need a school that can cater to that. And if you're not academic, then you need a school to cater to that as well.
I tell you what I'm going to do. We've got a lot of hands up. We can't obviously do the whole programme on grammar schools. Interesting as it would be, just to have hands up in the audience of those of you who would like to see, in principle, would like to see more grammar schools, and then I'll ask for those of you who don't. And how many of you would not like to see more? That's a sort of 2 to 1. OK, thank you very much. We'll go on to another question. Just before we do, we're going to be in Sutton Coldfield in Birmingham next week, and Boston in Lincolnshire the week after that. Come and join us. The way to do it is to go to the website address, which is there, or the telephone number's there. I'll give the full details at the end, but let's go on to another question. This one from Olivia Parsons, please. Olivia Parsons.
With the Labour Party currently tearing itself apart, is the SNP the only credible opposition to the current government?
Is the SNP the only real opposition? Alistair Campbell.
Well, the SNP is the government in Scotland. And I think the way that the SNP became the government has lessons for the Labour Party. My real worry about the Labour Party at the moment is that if we're not careful, we can go into, frankly, oblivion. We have no divine right to exist. What's happened, there were times, Joanna and I were talking about this earlier, the Labour Party took Scotland for granted for a long time, for far too long, and we paid a very, very heavy price. And I fear that what's happening at the moment with the Labour Party is that we are not reaching out beyond a fairly narrow core. It's great that Jeremy and John and the rest of them have brought in lots of new people into the party, and there's a lot of energy in there, but I worry that we are losing the things that you need to do, both the policy agenda and the politics, that actually allow you to win general elections.
What are you thinking of in particular?
Well, I think the politics has become, you're right about the party tearing itself apart, and I think that, in a sense, I'm not saying there's only blame. on Jeremy Corbyn, but I do think this whole sort of momentum thing has been incredibly divisive. I think a lot of people in the Labour Party, who've been in the Labour Party for a long time, feel that this is going back to a politics of the 1980s. There's a nastiness in the party which we haven't had since the 1980s. And also, there's always been an element within the Labour Party that prefers having power in the party to winning power in the country. And you need that. You need that, that's fine. But you can't have that as the driving force in the party. Now, when I say this, and I guarantee now, the Twitter trolls will be straight in.
Absolutely
He's obsessed with winning, he's a Tory, da-da-da-da. You get it all the time.
It's nasty.
I'm obsessed with winning because unless we win, the Tories can bring back grammar schools. Unless we win, we wouldn't have been able to have things like the minimum wage and Sure Start and devolution to Scotland and peace in Northern Ireland and all the other things that we did. You have to win power in this country. And John talks about building a social movement. Social movements don't deliver the things that a Labour government did and that a Labour government in the future can. So I do want the Labour Party to unite, but it has to unite around something, a policy agenda and politics that we can actually go to places like this. I can remember we went to Dorset South in 1997, not far from here. And I remember the media saying to us, this is just a stunt. You come into Dorset South, you're never going to win this. We won it, and we held it. Not by being hard left, not by saying anybody who's a Tory is a bad person. We're going to have to get Tories to vote for us. We're going to have to get SNP people to vote for us.
That's how you win.
And that is how we win. Right. And if we don't understand that and act according to that, I'm afraid, I worry genuinely that we're facing oblivion.
John McDonnell.
We have to win. We have to win. No one is arguing that we don't have to win. We have to win elections, and we have to ensure that we have the broadest appeal. And we have to recognise the political times in which we're in. The reason that Jeremy Corbyn got elected leader is because, excuse me, he reflects a movement, excuse me, right there across Europe and America as well. People have been through the crash of 2008. People have experienced the austerity over the years and wanted something different. People who wanted a straightforward politics as well, without spin and triangulation.
John, we did straightforward politics.
Let me
it was straightforward.
Let me finish. I think that's what people voted for when they elected Jeremy to be leader of the party. And at that point in time, we'd lost a general election. We were between 7 and 10 points behind in the polls. What then happened is that we won every parliamentary by-election and increased our majorities. We won every mayoral election. We matched Ed Miliband in the local council elections at his highest. And actually, we were overtaken.
So you're on course to victory.
Well, let me just...
Well, no, hang on a second. Let's just get to the point.
Let me just finish this point.
These long lists of what you've done.
Let me just finish this point.
All right,
We'd overtaken the Conservatives in the poll. So we were laying the foundations. We were laying the foundations, I believe, for electoral victory in due course. And we were bringing together the party, left, right and centre. The shadow cabinet that Jeremy appointed was from left, right and centre.
So what went wrong? Because, I mean, now you're clearly not in the lead in the polls.
Fair enough. But the lesson that we've got to learn very, very clearly is that people will not vote for a divided party. What happened is that a group of, unfortunately, people within the party weren't willing to accept Jeremy's mandate. They launched what is effectively a coup, and we've gone through a couple of months of, I think, absolute distraction.
But I'm interested in one thing. Do you think that the country as a whole has moved to the left? I mean, you make no bones about saying you're a Marxist. Your reaction to the capitalist crisis. I'm a Marxist. I'm honest with people. Is that what the country as a whole wants? A Marxist as Chancellor of the Exchequer?
I'm a socialist.
A Marxist are the words you used.
I'm a socialist.
Are you a Marxist?
No, I'm a socialist.
Well, why did you say I'm a Marxist?
Because actually, I was demonstrating a prediction of the capitalist crisis at the time. Anyway,
I'm honest with people. You said I'm a Marxist.
That's right. I was predicting what Marx would say in terms of the economic crisis that was coming.
You said, I'm a Marxist.
I was predicting...
You can go on YouTube
I was predicting what was coming.
You're a very nasty piece of work. And I shall tell you this as well. I'll tell you this. Let me tell you what's happening.
Finish a sentence.
Can I tell you what's happening in Parliament? Obviously, I don't agree with Labour MPs, but there are a number of Labour MPs who are good and honourable, decent people who believe in things that I don't agree with, but they add value and they are elected. They haven't formed a government, but they're there to do a job. And the job they're there to do is to hold my government to account and to represent those of you who are not Conservatives and make sure that your voice is heard and democracy prevails. And many of these people are frightened, so frightened, humiliated, almost terrorised by Mr McDonnell and his gang. They will leave politics, and that's bad for politics.
Rubbish.
And there is a fine example of it, ladies and gentlemen. You are being let down. As a democracy, we need good, strong oppositions who are credible, who test government, hold them to account.
But sorry, what is your... Just no,
We're in the position of relying on the SNP to do the job of the opposition.
John McDonnell,
it's shameful.
all right. You said he was a very nasty piece of work.
I think he is.
You may think that. You need to justify it if you say that.
Because there are colleagues of mine in the House of Commons, Labour MPs, who are at the point of being terrorised by McDonnell and his cronies. And they don't stand up to them. There are women MPs who suffer day in and day out from misogynist, unpleasant, sexist abuse on Twitter, on Facebook, from people who apparently are within their own party. There is a Jewish Labour MP, a woman who is living in a safe house because of the levels of anti-Semitism she has to bear. It's a disgrace and it must stop, and you, sir, can stop it.
Alistair Campbell.
This is
Alistair, I just want to know, do you... Alistair Campbell, do you recognise that picture, just before I come to John? I will let you.
You've not allowed me to speak while this abuse has been levelled at me. Let me make this absolutely clear, and we've made it clear time and time again. We will not tolerate abuse within the Labour Party. We've condemned it time and time again. Every time there's been a level of abuse that's been waged, and Jeremy Corbyn has made it absolutely clear, if we've identified the individual, they will be out of this party and suspended. Simple as that. We're not accepting this smear campaign that's going on from the Tories and others as well. We've been working over the last year to unite the party, and we were winning electorally and in the polls. Yes, a coup was launched by a small minority who could not accept Jeremy's mandate. We are a small minority who could not accept the mandate. Jeremy was elected on the basis of 59.5% of our members. We are now going through a democratic election. Once that election is over, whoever is the leader, we will unite behind. And we have been effective opposition in terms of defeating the Tories on tax credits, on PIP, the cuts for disabled people, and a range of others.
What were you saying in the back there? I'll come to you, Campbell. Who was shouting out about MPs? One of you. Was it you in the green shirt? No?
Red jacket.
No, in the red jacket, yes.
It was a minority. There was 80% of the MPs had no confidence in Jeremy Corbyn. That's not a minority.
OK,
Alistair Campbell, not a majority.
You heard what Anna Suber said. Do you recognise anything of that in Labour?
I certainly think... I mean, I said earlier that... I'm not going to get personal. I said earlier that I think there is a level of nastiness inside the Labour Party at the moment that's really quite upsetting for a lot of people. And it's not necessary, it's not nice. I do think some of it is because there are elements of the old hard left who've always frankly hated the Labour Party, who have now got a big voice within the Labour Party. That's a fact. And that is turning a lot of people off, and I think it's going to turn the public off once they know that that's going on. But I also want to say something about what John said about how this has all come about. Because these members of the shadow cabinet, I don't even see this as a coup. I see this as a group of people who were trying to make something work and who decided over time, this isn't working and it's not going to work. Yeah. And I look at what this government is doing. I look at something like Brexit. Now, OK, there's been a referendum. I was, as was Anna, on the losing side. But I know, and I still feel, this is potentially a disaster for the country, and I see no opposition. I don't see the opposition with a strategy. I
have a
don't
strategy.
see.
We have a strategy.
I don't see it.
We have a
Honestly,
strategy.
I don't see it. And when John talks about we have to unite, yes, we have to unite, but we have to be clear what we are uniting around.
Well, what's interesting in the leadership debate, is that there's been virtually no difference on policy. The most common expression used by Owen Smith is, I agree with Jeremy. So the issue is not around policy. We've actually turned those arguments around.
I don't agree.
We're an anti-austerity party. We have our red lines in terms of the Brexit campaign, which is unanimously agreed across the Parliamentary Labour Party. And we're campaigning. Well, we're distracted by a leadership election that should never have been brought about.
Joanne Cherry, the question... Joanna Cherry, I'll come to members of the audience in a moment. I just want to hear, the question, of course, was, is the SNP the only credible opposition because Labour's tearing itself apart? Joanna.
I think you have the answer to your question, Olivia. We've just seen Labour tearing itself apart on the panel this evening.
That was
You know, I don't care whether John is a Marxist or a socialist. I don't care whether people are nasty to each other or not. We're all grown up and we can cope with a degree of acrimony. What I care about is whether or not the Labour Party is forming an effective opposition to this Conservative government. And it's patently clear they are not. They are simply incapable of doing it. Now, earlier this summer, when we had the result of the European Union referendum campaign, the government were missing in action, but so were the official opposition. The only person who had any sort of a plan or strategy was the SNP's leader, the First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon. Now, you don't have to agree with us, but I think you can agree that she had a plan and she had a strategy, and she's carrying it through. 3 months later, we still don't know what Theresa May's plan is. She says Brexit means Brexit, but she doesn't have any idea what Brexit actually means. The official opposition should be harrying the government over that, cross-examining them, holding them to account for the shambles of lack of policy that they have. Instead, they're fighting amongst themselves like a bunch of student politicians.
This is an SNP.
Jeremy Corbyn doesn't even raise the issue of... That's nonsense, John, and I'll deal with that in a minute.
Implementing austerity.
Well, if you'd let me speak, because you had a long time to speak earlier. Jeremy Corbyn seems incapable of asking the Prime Minister about Brexit, the biggest crisis facing this country at the moment. He doesn't want to bring it up, I suspect, because he doesn't really believe in the European Union. It is left to the leader of the SNP at Westminster, my colleague Angus Robertson, to interrogate Theresa May repeatedly about what Brexit means. Does it mean we'll stay in the single market? Does it mean you'll have to pay visas to go on your holidays to Spain and France? Does it mean that passporting for financial services will be taken away, damaging the City of London and the financial sector in the City of Edinburgh, which I represent? She's not able to answer any of these questions. But it's not Labour who are asking her those questions. It's my party.
All right. Well, you've made the point.
Well, I want to pick up on what John said, David,
I want to come to Quentin Letts. Sorry, Quentin Letts.
As you can see, it's quite interesting down in Parliament at the moment, and to be a sketch writer is bliss. I'd say in the House of Commons, the SNP they attend a lot, they talk a heck of a lot, but they are fairly parochial, and they're not listened to that much, I don't think. The Commons is more nuanced than that. There's a lot of opposition to the government on the Tory benches. And there's also, in British public life, that opposition comes from different quarters. It's not just in Parliament. Opposition comes, dare I say it, from the BBC sometimes. It comes from the quangocracy. It comes from the establishment blob. So there is opposition to the government, and just look at the difficulty it's having with the grammar schools proposal. So I think it'd be wrong to say that the SNP is the only opposition. I've got a bit of a soft spot for Jeremy Corbyn on a personal level. But there is this paradox in Labour. Corbyn has a certain... He seems to be quite honest in some ways. He's got a certain lascivious glint in his eye that I quite like. And there is about him with his old steptoe haircut. I think he's an interesting, likeable figure. But at the same time, there is this momentum lot who are pretty unpleasant with their views on Israel and the sort of way they've been treating some of the MPs. I would just give a warning to John. I just went this week, to see A Tale of Two Cities, a production, and that shows you the French Revolution. Fascinating, really good production. But Robespierre, who was a leader of the French Revolution, came unstuck in the end, and he got killed by his own revolutionaries. Let it be a lesson to you, my friend, that if you get in to that sort of extreme revolutionary behaviour, you get the reign of terror And that's what I think is going to happen.
Yeah.
All right. Now, the reign of terror. I see it in front of me. Who should we go to? The person up there, the man in the pale blue shirt. Yes. You, with spectacles.
Oh, hello.
Yes, yes, hello. Sorry, you've been waiting a bit.
Sorry. I think it is indicative of the state that the Labour Party's in when it takes a Tory MP to defend Labour MPs from abuse from within their own party, and it takes the SNP to actually argue against the Tory MP. I mean, it's quite a scandal that you've got this party which is so divided against itself and seeks to represent ordinary people by doing the work it does. And you've got the point that you've got the point that Quentin Letts made. Jeremy Corbyn went to an event for Labour Friends of Israel, didn't mention the word Israel or Jews once. He just sort of stuck to his spiel.
And you, sir, in the front here.
My observation is it seems that the Labour Party is moving towards being an organisation of protest and not an organisation with the ability to pursue power and policies through Parliament, and you only need to look at the 80%. If you can't lead, you can't win, you can't achieve anything.
And the first line of our constitution is that we exist to be a force in Parliament. Yeah.
No.
This is why the MPs are so important, the PLP is so important, and they're being sidelined.
Alistair Campbell, does Tony Blair bear the blame, the principal blame for this, because of the obloquy that he now incurs in this country over Iraq and other things and his own private behaviour subsequently? Do you think that the Blair years, your years, that this is what follows because of what they were?
I'll tell you, I certainly don't put everything at the door of Jeremy Corbyn. I think that would be really unfair. I think that there are issues going back to when we were in power, Iraq being the most obvious in terms of policy, but also things like tuition fees, which were very, very difficult for a lot of people. We lost support. But don't forget, David, we won an election after Iraq. And the second thing I would say is that we've always... I think what Tony Blair always tried to do was to understand that most people are not living in the political bubble that we live in. And I think he always had an understanding of that. And I think there's a real danger at the moment that we're losing that. And so I think we focus far too much on... I think the Tony Gordon thing was very damaging. I think it did lead actually to a draining of talent. I think that we didn't bring on talent in the way maybe that we should and could have done. And I think where John is right is to say that a lot of this is about globalisation. I think people do feel absolutely hacked off with inequality, and they're looking for something very, very different. My point is that actually they shouldn't be looking for something that different, take the personalities out of it, to the sort of politics that we tried to give to the country. And I think it's a disaster. Wait a minute, John. I think it's a disaster for the Labour Party.
Nauseating.
Why is it nauseating?
Because you're the person, above all else, who actually created a political environment where no one believed a word a politician said after a bit.
I don't agree. I'm sorry, John.
And you lost us 5 million votes in that process and set us up to fail.
We won 3 general elections,
the reason Jeremy was elected was because they wanted some honesty back in politics again.
That's fine. You can say... Look, John, I've come on here tonight to be as nice to you as I possibly can.
So have I. The feeling is mutual.
OK. And I'll tell you why. Because I care about the Labour Party. I really care about the Labour Party. And I worry that you and yours are destroying it. And what's more, I actually worry you don't even care.
You took us to the edge. We're now rebuilding what we can.
I'll tell you something
We're trying to restore honesty and confidence in politics again that you destroyed.
OK.
You took us to it.
I'll tell you something.
Using Labour
It's just unbelievable. It's unbelievable that we win 3 general elections. We do things like the minimum wage. And all he wants to do...
Which we supported.
I understand...
Which we supported.
Let me say,
and you took us to Iraq.
I understand why newspapers like the Daily Mail want to trash Tony Blair. Because we won elections and they're a right-wing newspaper. I understand why the Tories want to trash New Labour, because we beat them 3 times. But when the Labour Party's doing it, it's utterly ridiculous, and it's part of, I'm afraid, the revolutionary posh boy madness that's taken this party over.
The woman falling from the back. Yes, you.
Unbelievable. You don't deserve to win.
Let her speak, please.
You took us to this crisis.
Personally, I think the problem is with these politicians going at each other like they're 5-year-olds in school, frankly, and then we have this whole stigma surrounded by politics, and young people that are my age won't go and vote because they see these politicians and aren't inspired by them, and they don't believe in them because they're going at each other like they just have nothing to say apart from tiny little digs, like Facebook videos of Theresa May, who can make the biggest dig at each other. And I just frankly think it's pathetic.
Nonsense.
But young people are inspired. I personally am inspired by Jeremy Corbyn.
That's good.
Because he is honest.
Right.
Because he doesn't.
Listen.
Because
No,
he goes
hold on,
into
let her- sorry.
Parliament. He goes into Parliament in a suit which didn't cost hundreds of thousands, and he didn't claim that money. He didn't claim that taxpayers' money, and he just tells the truth. And I think he's truly inspiring. And for you to make digs at him,
I'm not digging at him.
I'm
actually, sorry, Anna, I'm not making any digs. I actually think Jeremy Corbyn, I agree with Quentin, I think he's got a lot of qualities. And actually, but what I find extraordinary, and I think what you're seeing actually tonight, I think Jeremy Corbyn in the Labour Party is not necessarily the problem. I desperately want the Labour Party to win a general election.
What's the problem?
The problem is there are elements within the Labour Party who actually don't, because they want the Labour Party to be taken over.
Can I just say something?
Can I
just say something? In the first part of our programme, we debated grammar schools. And I think we had a good debate. Nobody was personal. Nobody was trying to make a cheap political point. I thought that was a genuine debate. So forgive me, I think you're wrong when you say that politicians don't often have good, rigorous debates. And secondly, the idea that my colleagues wear thousands and pounds worth of suits. I don't know where you've got that from.
Because
But
Jeremy
that's
has the
not
smallest
true.
expenses. Jeremy doesn't he have
David
the smallest
Cameron did,
expenses?
George
but he's-
Osborne did.
It's a small point, I think, about
it is a
it's a
small
matter
point.
of
I think you're
image.
missing
But
the
it's
main
the
point,
basis
that
of
you
a point.
started this whole debate and you went at John.
Oh,
you
I will go
started
for John
it.
McDonnell. Yes.
What's interesting
I will go
now?
for that man,
Well, what's
because this
interesting?
man I blame, not
This
Jeremy
personal
Corbyn,
abuse I don't
but
tolerate.
this
What's
man.
interesting now
Yes.
is that we've got the largest political party in the whole of Europe.
Good.
And it is as a result of large numbers of young people coming into politics, often for the first time.
But it doesn't know what it stands for. It
And
doesn't know
that
what
was
it stands for.
translating into electoral successes
right.
until this happened 3 months ago.
right.
We will come back together. We will unite because we agree on the policies. Whoever is the leader will unite behind with discipline, and we will start winning elections again on that basis.
Right, hold on. All right, wait. We're going to go on. But very briefly, Alistair Campbell, just one thing. Why do you seem to have it in for John McDonnell, but not in for Jeremy Corbyn?
I don't, because, because
No, he does too.
while I was sitting here trying to do my best to be constructive about how the Labour Party might go forward, he suddenly starts going on about how I've lost 5 million votes and that somehow we're the problem. That's what I don't have it in for him at all.
All right, you don't have it in for
and
each
also,
other.
can I just say one thing?
You were abusing ordinary members of the Labour
Looks like from here.
85 out of 89 polls prior to the so-called coup, we were behind.
Yeah.
In the other 4, we were neck and neck. So he's just not telling the truth about the polls.
I think viewers can decide for themselves who's got it in for whom as a result of watching this. But I want to go on to another question, because we've only got a quarter of an hour, but I'll just take a point from you, madam, there. Yes, in the middle.
I'm sure Jeremy Corbyn is a very nice chap. But honestly, Mr MacDonald, do you really think he can lead the party?
Yes, he can. He's a new type of leader. He's the sort of leader that we now need. Someone who is completely honest, as exactly said, no spin, no triangulation, has been able to unite the party on the policies, because there's no difference on policies, and actually I think he's a type of leader that people will respect. We've had enough of these big leaders who take us elsewhere.
Go on, then. All right, one point from you, yes. Man in the grey suit there.
Alistair Campbell's hit the nail on the head. The point is, he designed New Labour. They got elected. All right, it was a disaster, but they got elected.
Oh, excuse me.
You will never.
So you want when you win 3 times?
Yeah, but we're still living with your legacies, unfortunately.
This is your opposition.
You want us to elect a disastrous administration?
Let him make his point.
But I'm old enough to remember the dark ages of the Labour Party in the early 80s, which unfortunately the young people don't remember.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where we're going
Read some
back.
history books.
And as for
No,
the
it isn't. He's bringing
SNP
it back.
being a
No,
credible
it isn't.
opposition, let's just remind ourselves, they've got 56 seats with 1.4 million votes. And a system that allows that is something that needs to be changed.
OK, we're getting on. All right. I don't see that. What on? Sorry, no, John, stop a second.
I agree with that.
What do you want to come back on?
I'd like
Because
to come
I
back
want
on
to
the
move on to
gentleman's
another
point
point.
in the audience.
Which point?
The point that's just been made,
Yeah,
that
but
somehow
what
the
about the
SNP aren't
SNP?
legitimate. The SNP government in Scotland has the highest popular mandate of any government in Western Europe. This lot, with their infighting, their dividedness, are never going to achieve anything like that.
You're a product of the system, nothing more.
Sue Allenby, please. Come to the rescue, Sue Allenby.
Why can't we leave the European Union now?
Why can't we leave the European Union now? We voted for it, we should leave. Quinton Letts, why can't we leave the European Union now?
Well, I would just say we've all got to go and have supper afterwards, so it's going to be interesting. With the fighting that's been going on. The people have spoken, madam, have they not? 17.5 million people voted to come out.
That was in June.
And how many people voted for Tony Blair?
We haven't even had a leak from Whitehall, so what's happening?
Well, let me just put my answer in context. 17.5 million people voted for Brexit. I think 13.5 voted for Tony Blair in 97. So that gives you the scale of that vote. It's a big mandate there, and the people are impatient. And I think that they are right to be impatient. I don't think it can happen immediately, because you want to try to negotiate some sort of trade relationship with the EU. It might happen, it might not. We might come out of the single market. We might stay in it under certain terms. I don't know. But I think it's right to give the politicians a bit of a chance to come up with a deal. And, I've had no doubt that the Article 50 is going to be buttoned sometime next year, and I think we are going to be sailing out of the EU, and alleluia. I'm very glad about that. People get cross with Theresa May for not telling us every moment what is going on. I think that's a little unrealistic. I think if you are going to be a good poker player, or perhaps in Salisbury a good bridge player, I think you wouldn't... was that terribly prejudiced? You wouldn't necessarily show your hand all the time. But I do think that the message is going to get into Brussels' head, despite the resistance there, that the British people are most clear on the issue of freedom of movement, and I don't think that will be accepted by our politicians. I do think, don't I just lastly say, that the attitude in Brussels, at the moment there's lots of harumphing from Monsieur Drunkard and Monsieur Rumpy Pumpy, but that is going to alter. And I have no doubt that they will become more realistic, and it's going to happen the sooner the better.
Now who's being parochial? Now who's being parochial?
Sue Allenby, I want to come back to you. Sue, what actually is your concern about this? You say we voted in June. The vote happened in June.
In June. No information has filtered out. There are 17.5 million people wondering what is going to happen and why it can't happen sooner than later. And we hear from Theresa May that it may not happen for a long time. But nobody knows why exactly.
And do you think that there may be some backtracking going on, deliberate backtracking?
Who knows?
Or do you think they're trying to work things out?
That's how rumours start, isn't it?
What do you think, the man in the blue shirt there?
I think Brexit is a bit like something out of Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. It's whatever you want it to mean. Nobody knows, and that's the problem, because it's just a word. And for some people it means staying in Europe and having trade agreements. Others means completely coming out, and there's various flavours in between. And until that's decided, we're stuck with this vagueness which will carry on, and I suspect we will never leave. And I hope we don't.
Never leave?
I hope we don't. We should stay in.
Joanna Cherry. You were applauding him. Do you agree with him we should never leave?
Well,
despite the vote?
The electorate that I represent voted to remain in the European Union. 62% of the Scottish electorate voted to remain, and every local authority region in Scotland voted to remain. So my duty as an SNP MP is to try and get the best possible deal for Scotland, recognising that Scotland voted to remain. But to answer the lady's question, Madam, the reason that we can't leave the European Union now is because the Leave campaign sold you a pup. It is not easy to leave the European Union. In order to start the process of leaving the European Union, we have to trigger Article 50. Before we do that, we have to have some sort of a plan. The government has no plan. The Leave campaign admitted the day after they won the vote that they had no plan. Theresa May doesn't know what Brexit means. As I said earlier, she can't tell you whether it involves staying in the single market, whether it involves keeping passporting for our vital financial sectors in Edinburgh and London, and whether it will mean that we'll all have to pay to go abroad on our holidays. She's not able to answer any of those questions.
She says it means Brexit, doesn't she?
When people
Brexit
like
means
Quinton
Brexit.
try to lead you up the garden path while being very rude about our European brothers and sisters, try to lead you up the garden path to make you think that Brexit's easy, they're telling you a pack of lies. And don't just take it from me. Look at the case of Greenland. Greenland has a population the size of Croydon. I mean, no disrespect to Greenland, because the fishing industry is very important in my country as well. But the only important industry in Greenland is fishing, a population the size of Croydon. It took Greenland 3 years to leave the European Union. It took us 9 years, the European Union, to negotiate the current trade deal we're negotiating with Canada, and it still hasn't been finalised. Nicola Sturgeon said in a speech yesterday that, in evidence to a committee at the Scottish Parliament, that this Brexit vote could lead to a decade of uncertainty. Your government is not being honest with you. They're not able to tell you what Brexit means, and they don't have a plan. These people in Brussels that Quinton so deprecates, they have all their negotiators in place, they're organised and ready to go. They want Britain to come to the negotiating table. Britain can't come to the negotiating table because Theresa May doesn't have a plan, the Leave campaign don't have a plan, and you were sold a pup by the campaign and by your government.
And do you, Joanna, are you therefore concluding it's not going to happen like he is?
Well,
very brief, because you've had a long say. Just yes or no?
I think it's going to be difficult. I'm a Democrat, and I respect the fact that the people of England and Wales voted to leave the European Union.
Yes or no, is it going to happen?
I can't answer that question.
OK, Anna Soubry.
Well, look, the thing
is it going to happen?
We have said that, well, I have said, for example, that obviously I accept the vote and the people have spoken. And during the whole of the campaign, when people like ourselves and Alistair and indeed Joanna were out there trying to persuade people to vote to stay in the European Union, we made it clear that if we voted to come out, that is what we would get, that we would leave. Joanna, I agree with what she says when she says that the trouble is this is fiendishly, appallingly complicated. It is not as simple as just walking away from it, even invoking Article 50, as you say, you've got to lay the groundwork. There are other problems as well. We have elections in Germany and elections in France and indeed in other countries in the EU. And that also will play a huge part because obviously Merkel will be wanting to sort out matters in her own country. And frankly, the idea that we are going to be top of her wish list is just the stuff of the fairies. So it is going to take time, it is going to take effort. And what I do believe we now need is, I don't believe we want the running commentary, as Theresa May has rightly said, but I do think we need a plan. And most importantly, those people that led the Leave campaign, who sit in some of the highest offices now of government, people like Boris Johnson, people who persuaded the people across the United Kingdom to vote to leave the EU, they must be held to account.
What about
they must deliver.
All right. What about holding to account the people who said Remain on the grounds that if we voted to leave, there'd be a DIY recession, which there doesn't seem to have been? What about the people who said the economy would collapse? No, they said it would happen as soon as the vote happened.
No, they didn't. No, we didn't actually.
All right, Alistair Campbell.
We didn't say that.
The emergency budget, we haven't had an emergency budget.
No, you're right,
David.
David, you're right on that, and that shouldn't have been said. But please,
so
I'm
it's not just the other side, but your side as well.
No, but this is important. We haven't left, but we have had good figures. But we must not kid ourselves that as we move into an increasing period of uncertainty, we're apparently going to trigger Article 50 early next year, then I fear that we will enter periods of great economic concern.
We've only got a couple of minutes left. Alistair Campbell and John McDonnell.
The reason why it's so complicated, this, and what was awful about that dismal, dreadful campaign.
Which one was that?
Vote Leave on Thursday, and by Friday we'll have £350 million going to the National Health Service. It was dismal.
It was a lie.
And you've now got to go through interlocking negotiations covering how do we leave, our free trade agreement with the rest of Europe, interim cover while that's going on, how we enter the WTO, the World Trade Organization, as the UK not the EU, 53 free trade arrangements that we have to make with individual countries where now we have them with Europe, and an arrangement on foreign defence and security policy. Canada has got 300 full-time trade negotiators. David Davis stood up in the House of Commons the other day and said proudly, we're going to have 180 civil servants working on this. It's pathetic.
All right.
There wasn't a plan A, and that's why there isn't a plan B, and they're making it up as they go along.
OK. And we've only got 30 seconds left now. John McDonnell, what about Owen Smith's idea that Labour could reapply to join the EU in the election of 2020? Is that on the cards?
No, we've had a referendum. We have to, much as I regret it, we have to respect that decision of the referendum. And we have to very quickly now create a new relationship with Europe. And we need to get on with that. And the point that has been made is we might not have had the recession hit us immediately, but investment decisions are being made now that for next year will start hitting us. And it is right the way across the economy as well. That uncertainty is impacting upon the economy already, and it will hit us even harder. So we've got to go into these negotiations fast. We've got to make sure we secure access to the market. We protect EU citizens here and UK citizens in Europe as well. We've got to try and get the financial services passport as well. And as well, we need to protect the employment and environmental regulations that came through Europe. That's the red lines that Labour has set out. And actually, we're meeting on a regular basis now with our socialist and social democratic parties right the way across Europe to try and get the best deal we possibly can. We've got to respect the decision, but we've got to get some certainty about a new Europe that I think will take some of the benefits of the EU and overcome some of the perceived disbenefits of the EU that people, well, motivated people to leave, unfortunately.
Thank you. I can take one last word from the woman there. Her hand up a long time.
Understand is why being part of the EU is considered being European. Because Switzerland, they're not part of the EU, they have a thriving economy, but you would call them European. So I don't understand why MPs and members of the public are saying, oh, because we're going to leave the EU, we're no longer going to be European, we're going to cut ties.
Are you happy about the way things are going yourself?
I mean, being a 16-year-old when the vote happened, I couldn't have my voice heard.
Now you have it heard.
Now I'm having it heard, yeah, but it was quite frustrating.
We wanted you to have your voice heard. We voted for you to have a vote.
No, just so we must stop. But do you feel happy with the way things are going, or are you uneasy?
I mean, personally, I'm probably one of the few young people who would have voted leave.
We should be on the panel.
OK. I don't know whether there's an age limit for the panel. I don't think there is.
Well, a bit of BBC balance. So in 5 of us here, I'm the only one a Brexiteer, and the country just voted for
we must stop. We must stop. No, you can't hear his voice even when he raises. We're going to be. It's the end of the programme, I'm afraid. I've been